Good morning, dear hearts. We are on lesson 74, and please subscribe. There is no will but God's. This is a lesson that says it's a central thought towards which all of our exercises are directed. For us to truly understand that there is no will but God's, there is no desire but God's. God's will be done. You've heard me say that before. It's an idea that has played out in several of our previous lessons, and I'll briefly mention them, but also in the text in chapter 9, first section, first line. So it's a 911. So where do we call when we need help? We call 911. And our 911 is fear of the will of God is one of the strangest beliefs the human mind has ever made. Why would we be afraid of the will of God? Because the will of God is our will for ourselves. God doesn't want anything for us that we do not want. So fear of the will of God is a strange belief that was conjured up by the human mind. But you know what? It is not real. That fear is not real. We have no reason to be afraid of the will of God. Remember the lesson? There's nothing to fear. Well, there it is. So going back into today's lesson, it says God's is the only will, okay? God's will is the only will. And when you've recognized this, you've recognized that your will is His. And the belief that conflict is possible is gone, and peace has replaced the strange idea that you are torn by conflicting goals. As an expression of the will of God, you have no goal but His. We are an expression of God's will. We are an extension of that mind. So why would we be afraid of being an extension of God's mind? And it says this idea is wholly true, that we are an extension of God's mind and that our will and God's are one. Therefore, it cannot give rise to illusions, and without illusions, conflict is impossible. It is only in our illusory mind, in our ego mind, that we find conflicting goals, that we find things to be upset about, that we find chaos, that we find anger, that we find fear. But there is none of that within the will of God and within God's mind. And some of the lessons where, we were instructed about God's will was in 19 when we were told about salvation. Salvation is possible because it's God's will. So salvation, our desire, our freedom, our happiness, it's possible. It's God's will. And we were told that, God is the mind with which I think. And we were told it's God's will that you succeed. And we were told that God is our strength and vision is His gift. And it said, you will see. It's God's will. So all of these things that we want this peace, we want this contentment, and all of it comes to us because it is God's will. Acceptance of today's idea will bring us great peace, and not just for us, but to every mind. And it's also going to be in the remembering of who we are. And again, we are an expression, an extension of God's love. For the practicing, there's longer practice periods, and we're given multiple phrases to use in our practice. And one of them says, hold this in your mind. There is no will but God's. I cannot be in conflict. Spend several minutes adding related thoughts. And as we know, we're not in January anymore. We're not in Kansas anymore. And some of you might be in Kansas, but we are now working with a mind that is not wholly and completely untrained and unsustainable. We are working towards a sustainability in our mind, that we are able to sustain peace. We are able to sustain joy and true thoughts within our mind. So some of the thoughts were given: I am at peace. Nothing can disturb me. My will is God's. My will and God's are one. God wills peace for His Son. God wants peace for His Son. His Son wants peace as well. There's no conflict there. It says during the introductory phrase, be sure to deal quickly with any conflict thoughts that might cross your mind. And, that can happen. Tell yourself, there is no will but God's. These conflict thoughts are meaningless. God did not create a meaningless world. thoughts of conflict, thoughts that are meaningless, I have no place for them. I will not hold on to them within my mind. Practicing at least a minute or two every half hour to close your eyes if possible. Tell yourself there is no will but God's. God's will for me is perfect peace. I share that with him. My conflict thoughts, my hesitancy, my anger, my upsettedness about this cannot be real. It tells us that, if we are being successful, if we're succeeding, we will feel a deep sense of joy and an increased alertness rather than a feeling of drowsiness and innervation. Sometimes, I think we've all had this, we read something, we read a page, it could be A Course in Miracles, it could be another book, but all of a sudden you finish the page and you go, what did I just read? That is the ego working, trying to distract us and delay us from finding our truth and who we really are. But when we have these feelings of abundant joy and laughter and peace and within each and every one of us, that is a sure sign that we are in joy, because joy characterizes peace. We are having a right-minded use of the body by experiencing joy, because that is our cue. That is how we know that we are coming home. When we are sad, when we are upset, when we are restless, when we're in doubt, that is the ego trying to work its own pathways within our mind and to keep us away from God's will for us, which indeed is the same that we have. God's will is the only will there is. There is no will but God's. I hope this helped. Please like, please share, please subscribe, please comment, please pray. I think I said the other day the acronym PUSH, pray until something happens. Pray until something happens. You'll know when it does. Namaste.